Chapter 621. After defeating the one-eyed pirate, most of the captured pirates chose to surrender, and some of the injured pirates were directly dealt with. 6 pirate ships. If he killed all the pirates, who would help him sail the ships? After accepting the surrender of a large number of pirates and taking control of all 6 pirate ships, Sulan looked at the one-eyed Shan on the deck next to him. At this time, the one-eyed Shan looked a little miserable. The power of thunder just now had caused a lot of damage to him. The powerful electric current had electrocuted many parts of his body into charcoal. If it weren't for the fact that the body of a level 4 warrior was strong enough, such serious injuries would have killed him. Although the warrior was the most popular profession with the lowest threshold, it didn't mean that this profession was useless. The body of a legendary warrior was so strong that he could bathe in magma. Even if his heart was pierced, his strong muscles could forcibly close the wound. If he could find a high-grade priest or wizard as soon as possible to cast a high-grade healing spell or a high-grade light of redemption on him, such fatal injuries could be quickly healed. Even without the help of a wizard or a priest, the powerful vitality of a legendary warrior would still continue to fight for a few minutes before dying. Although the one-eyed Shan looked miserable now, if he was given some time, he would soon be alive and kicking again. However, it was clear that Sulan didn't intend to give him this opportunity. "Bring him here." The 2 guards behind him stepped forward and dragged the unconscious one-eyed Shan over. "Wake him up." A marine lifted a bucket of seawater from the sea and poured it directly on his face. Whoosh! The pain from the wound caused the one-eyed Shan to wake up from his coma. "Are you awake?" Sulan looked at the battered and exhausted Shan and said in a deep voice. "Who are you? I don't think I have offended you." Shan shook his head and looked at Sulan with his one eye. "You didn't offend me?" It seems that one-eyed Shan's memory is not very good. Sulan sneered and continued, "Not long ago, the goods you dealt with were mine, and you say you didn't offend me? You are from Deepwater City?" Shan's eyes turned cold when he heard Sulan's words, and his heart sank. "Looks like you still remember." Sulan sneered, "Now that you know who I am, tell me the truth. Who did you sell my goods to? And how did you know that my fleet would pass by the Norman Islands? How did you set up an ambush there in advance? Ha ha ha, you captured me just to ask me this?" Xiao laughed heartily, ignoring the stinging pain from his wounds. Cough cough. After a while, Xiao finally stopped panting. "Why aren't you saying anything? Are you planning to fight it head-on? As long as you answer my questions honestly, I'll give you a quick death." Sulan looked at the pirate leader in front of him and scanned him up and down. "Speak. Why don't you speak?" Then he looked at Sulan with a mocking expression. "I dare say that you dare to go and settle the score with them? Your goods have been sold by me. The buyer is in the shipwreck harbor. He has the white gloves of the dragonborn sea giant. Do you dare to go?" Xiao struggled to say, and then he was suppressed by the 2 guards. "Dragonborn sea giant, I see. Now, the second question. How did you know the sailing route of my fleet?" Sulan said expressionlessly. "That's simple. Someone told me." Xiao said with a smile. "Someone sent me the message when your fleet left the harbor that day." "How do you think I know?" Sulan's face darkened. Although he had suspected that there was a mole in the fleet, now he finally confirmed it. "Why did you attack my fleet?" Sulan continued to ask. "It's simple. Someone doesn't want to see Deepwater City develop." Xiao didn't hide anything and directly told him what he knew. "Someone has taken a fancy to the specialties of Deepwater City, so they want to monopolize it. I'm just their pawn. Even if you can catch me and kill me, so what? You still can't keep your wealth. You don't even have the courage to take revenge. You want to monopolize the resources of Deepwater City?" Sulan frowned slightly. This result surprised him. "You don't understand. You have to know that you produce sugar, honey, rum, perfume, and paper. These things are in high demand in the southern seas. They can be sold for a high price. How can no one be jealous of such a huge profit? Sure enough, money moves people. Sulen nodded and continued, didn't you want me to find trouble with those people? Tell me, who is behind this? The people behind this are very simple. They are the nobles of the Netherland kingdom. You sent the goods here to sell. They want more, so they are ready to control the supply of goods in their hands. Of course, there is also the work of the dragonborn pirate king. These pirate kings cooperate with the surrounding countries and make a fortune together. You think they are opposing each other, but in fact, the pirate kings are inextricably linked with the surrounding big forces. How about it? Do you dare to take revenge? Huh. Cough cough. Xiaoen laughed at Sulen and then couldn't help but cough. That's it? Sulen shook his head slightly. That's what you're relying on? That's it? Xiaoen looked at Sulen in surprise. You don't think that I dare to fight you directly here because I don't know the ban here, do you? Sulen glanced at him and said, to be honest, I don't care about that dragonborn pirate king at all. Since he is also one of the people behind this robbery, let's take advantage of this opportunity to get rid of him once and for all. Sulen curled his lips and said. Get rid of the pirate king? Xiaoen's brain couldn't react. Well, the matter is over. What's the use of buying it? Kill him. Sulen waved his hand at the two guards. Wait, you don't want the treasure I hid. Before he could finish, a guard beside him pierced his heart with his sword from the back. Xiaoen's eyes widened. He couldn't believe that Sulen didn't even ask about his treasure and killed him directly. As the long sword was pulled out, Xiaoen's body trembled slightly twice. Bright red blood spurted out from the wound, and the light in his eyes dimmed in an instant. Sulen naturally wanted the one-eyed man's treasure, but the one-eyed man would definitely not tell the truth, so Sulen planned to use a simpler method, which was to let Hathaway use a prophecy spell to find the treasure. As there were already enough clues, this kind of prophecy spell didn't need to pay any price, and it wouldn't cause any backlash. P.S. Recommend a friend's book, The Reborn Prince Charming Starts Making Games. He was reborn in 2000, made a dating game, bought Tencent at the beginning, and had a single female lead. Chapter 622. Sir, there are pirates approaching us. They have crossed the warning distance. At this moment, a soldier hurriedly came to report. Sulen looked at the sea not far away. He saw more than a dozen pirate ships on the sea rushing here aggressively, and all the pirate ships had raised their flags. It was obvious that they were going to attack. These pirate ships all belonged to the Dragonborn Pirate King. Several pirate kings took turns to be in charge of Shipwreck Harbor. During this period, the Dragonborn Pirate King was in charge. Now Sulen directly attacked another pirate outside Shipwreck Harbor. This completely disregarded the Pirate King's ban. The Pirate King naturally would not let it go. Without any shouting, the pirates directly launched an attack. The Pirate King hated Sulen's behavior of breaking the rules. This was contempt of their authority. If these people were not dealt with as soon as possible, their so-called ban would become a piece of paper. This was not a situation they would allow. The largest of these pirate ships was a large warship that was 70 meters long. At the front of the warship was a dragon-head ram. This ship was not modified from an armed merchant ship like the other pirate ships. Instead, it was a warship, and even among warships, it was a big guy. On this dragon-head warship, the Dragonborn Pirate King was staring coldly at Sulen's fleet. There was a trace of coldness in his eyes. He was a hybrid giant monster. He had half sea giant blood and the other half human blood. However, the human blood was mixed with dragon blood. After awakening the dragon blood, he had become a dragonborn sea giant. Because of the dragon blood, there was a layer of dragon scales on the surface of his body. Even his palms had a dragon-like appearance. There was also a group of strange-looking dragonborn around him. These dragonborn were the products of some Euron creatures he hunted for dragon blood baptism. It was not only the blood of pure-blooded dragons that could be used for dragon blood baptism. Euron blood could also be used. However, the attribute bonus obtained from Euron blood baptism was far less than that of pure-blooded dragons. However, if there were many baptisms, the attribute bonus obtained from Euron blood baptism was still very good. In addition to these strange-looking dragonborn, there were also some sea creatures, such as quatones, sharkmen, and so on. The draconic pirate king put down his alchemy binoculars and ordered, "Attack with full force, leave no survivors. Kill all these bastards who dare to violate the pirate code." The dragonborn pirate king said as he picked up a huge battle-axe. This battle-axe was more than 2 meters long and weighed at least a few hundred pounds. This kind of heavy weapon was difficult for even barbarians to use, but in his hand, it was as easy as a one-handed axe. The dragonborn pirate king was more than 3 meters tall. Because of the awakening of the dragon blood, his strength had increased. At the same time, he also had a part of the giant's bloodline. The giant subspecies' strength was already high. Su Len speculated that his strength was likely to exceed 35 points, or even 40 points. His dragon bloodline had toughened his skin, greatly increasing his defense and various other resistances. The layer of scales on his body allowed him to have a defense equivalent to iron armor even without wearing armor. Coupled with the heavy weapon he used, this weapon could completely suppress any opponent in melee combat. Even a Tier 4 warrior would be heavily injured if not killed. Moreover, the dragonborn pirate king was not only a warrior. Because of the awakening of the dragon bloodline, he also had some magic abilities. At the same time, having the sea giant's bloodline gave him a part of the sea giant's strength. In the southern sea, the dragonborn pirate king might not be the strongest pirate king, but he was definitely the strongest pirate king. Quatones and sharkmen, go to the sea. The dragonborn pirate king directly ordered after seeing the huge shadow of the tiger shark in the sea. Quatones and sharkmen immediately jumped into the sea. Their role was to restrain the tiger shark. Although these fishmen were not a match for the tiger shark, it would not be easy for the tiger shark to kill them. These sea creatures were very flexible in the sea, and with cooperation, the tiger shark was not easy to deal with. Summon my pet, let the fishmen cooperate with it to get rid of the tiger shark. Woo woo woo. A low conch horn sounded, and the sound of the conch spread quickly. Soon, a huge shadow appeared from the bottom of the sea. It was a giant octopus. In terms of size, it was not smaller than Sullen's tiger shark, and it was even bigger. With the appearance of this sea monster, the quatones and sharkmen sneered and dove into the sea. It seems that this pirate king is quite strong. Su Len saw the sea monster at a glance. It would not be easy to determine the winner between these two giant sea monsters. However, the octopus had a helper, and Su Len naturally could not let his tiger shark suffer. With a wave of his hand, a few spells directly covered the tiger shark's body, and its strength instantly increased by a lot. Go, kill all those monsters and fishmen. The tiger shark shook its tail and quickly rushed towards the giant octopus. The dragonborn pirate king did not underestimate Su Len at all. The fact that he could kill the one-eyed dragon in such a short time was enough to prove how strong Su Len was. Open the cabin and release the bloodthirsty bats. The bloodthirsty bats were creatures transformed by the dragonborn pirate king using some evil spells. They were mutated bats that lived on the island. They were ferocious and were even larger than an adult. After being transformed by the dragonborn pirate king, these bats were even larger and more bloodthirsty. With the pirate king's order, more than a dozen ships immediately opened the special cabins on the ships, and huge bats quickly flew out of the cabins. Hundreds of bloodthirsty bats gathered together and quickly flew towards Sullen's fleet. Flying monsters? You want to compete with Northern Battlefront City in the Air Force? Su Len sneered, and then a powerful energy rushed out of his body in an instant, and this energy quickly formed a runic circle. In the name of my Su Len, show yourself, my mount. The hexagram circle shone with a dazzling light, and then a spatial rift was directly torn open. The next second, a huge figure with a ferocious appearance appeared in mid-air. Then there was a sound of cold air being sucked in, and the figure of the red dragon Onyxvia appeared in front of them. As soon as it appeared, Onyxvia spread its huge dragon wings and flew up. A loud dragon roar resounded through the sea, and its body circled in mid-air. Chapter 623. As soon as the adult red dragon appeared on the battlefield, a powerful dragon aura spread out. Many pirates who were not strong enough directly collapsed on the deck under this pressure. Ordinary people could not resist the dragon's aura at all. Only a small number of pirates could resist this interference. The bloodthirsty bats that were originally rushing over were also affected by the dragon's aura and became a little stagnant. Master, is this the sea? Onyxvia looked around and was a little excited. This was the first time she saw the sea. In the fire elemental plane, she had only seen the magma sea at most. She only knew about the sea in the dragon's inheritance. It's the sea. Su Len smiled slightly. Aren't you an adult? Sleep every day, move around, go and shoot down those big bats for me. Onyxvia glanced at the bloodthirsty bats not far away, then roared excitedly, I was just thinking about moving around. The dragon's huge body circled slightly, then its huge dragon wings flapped, and it rushed toward those big bats like a whirlwind. The battle could be said to be a one-sided massacre. Creatures like dragons were almost the overlords of the sky. Although those bloodthirsty bats were numerous and strong, they did not have the advantage in size or strength. Even the claws of these big bats could not even pierce the dragon scales. With a dragon breath of the red dragon, these bloodthirsty bats were directly burned into charcoal, and then fell from the sky one after another. In the blink of an eye, all the bloodthirsty bats in the sky were killed. On the other side, when the dragon descendant pirate king saw the sudden appearance of the dragon, he suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. Then the dragon killed all the bloodthirsty bats that had just been released. Even after eliminating those bloodthirsty bats, the dragon dived toward a pirate ship next to it. The pirates on the pirate ship were scared and hid everywhere. Many pirates even jumped directly into the sea. Boom! The scorching flame dragon blood instantly hit the pirate ship. The 40-meter-long sailboat instantly turned into a big fire torch. The whole ship was ignited by the dragon's breath. The pirates on the ship who had no time to escape were directly burned into charcoal. The whole sea was illuminated red by this flame. As soon as the battle began, the pirates had already burned down a ship. This is, evil dragon. Not good, it's flying over. Run. Many pirates were so frightened by the sudden appearance of the dragon that their teeth chattered. When these ferocious pirates saw a powerful pirate ship being destroyed in just a breath, their confidence was completely shattered. Don't be afraid, quickly rush to the enemy. The dragon descendant pirate king saw that his subordinates were about to collapse and immediately shouted. Hurry up and get close. As long as we get close to those people's boats, the dragons won't be able to attack. Don't even think about running away. No matter how fast a ship can run, can it compare to a dragon's wings? The faster you run, the faster you die. Hurry, hurry, hurry. This dragon was summoned by the other side and has a time limit. As long as we survive the time limit, the dragon will leave immediately. This is our only chance to survive. It had to be said that the dragon descendant pirate king had a high prestige on the island. In this case, the pirates subconsciously followed the orders of the dragon descendant pirate king and rushed towards Sullen's fleet. The dragon-descendant pirate king's approach was right. Escaping in this situation was courting death. Only by rushing up to Sullen's fleet and fighting hand-to-hand, the dragon could not use dragon's breath. In order not to accidentally injure Sullen's fleet, the dragon basically could not attack. Seeing the pirate ships rushing up, Sulen smiled slightly and waved the thunder god's spear in his hand gently. A flash of light instantly flashed from his body. In the next second, a large amount of seawater suddenly rose from the sea. The seawater poured down in all directions, and a behemoth rose from the sea. It was Sullen's magic ship Angry Dragon. What kind of monster is this? This is a magic ship. Not good, dodge. It's too late. The pirates who wanted to rush up and fight looked at the magic ship in horror. As soon as the magic ship appeared, it quickly moved. The terrifying ram flashed with a cold light, and the huge hull quickly collided with the pirate ship in front. Rumble. There was a loud noise, and a large amount of wood chips flew. The pirate ship that was sailing quickly was directly hit in two by the angry dragon. A large number of pirates panicked and wanted to jump off the ship. Unfortunately, the pirate ship sank very quickly. Before these pirates could swim out of the range, a large whirlpool swallowed them all. The appearance of the angry dragon and the red dragon raised the morale of the Deepwater City Navy. Even the sailors who had just joined the Deepwater City Navy were excited. Originally, these people were trembling and pale after seeing the Pirate King's flag, but now it was as if they had been injected with chicken blood. There was a burst of cheers. Barbossa jumped directly on the mast, his whole face flushed red. An uncontrollable excitement came from his body. The long sword in his hand pointed at the pirate ship not far away and roared, "Charge! Kill these pirates! Destroy these trash! Long live the North Wind Kingdom! Kill these pirates! Long live the North Wind Kingdom! Charge!" The Deepwater City Navy all roared at this moment, and the deafening sound echoed on the sea. All the ships launched a charge and rushed in the direction of the pirate ship without hesitation. With the help of the Red Dragon and the magic ship, the morale of the Deepwater City Navy was greatly boosted. On the contrary, the morale of the pirates led by the Pirate King, which had just risen, fell instantly. Facing a situation where they were bound to lose, not many of these pirates could still rush up to fight without hesitation. After the angry dragon sank a pirate ship, it began to show its power. The ballistae on the ship that had been loaded immediately fired. These ballistae were very powerful, and they were nailed to the surrounding ships in an instant. In the next second, there was a flash of light on the angry dragon, and a flame appeared. The flame rushed up like a fire dragon and directly ignited the ship. This special oil was mixed by wizards, and it would burn for a long time if it stuck on it. Soon, these flames spread quickly on the ship. The pirate ship could not resist such an attack at all. Some of the pirates tried to use seawater to extinguish the flames, but after the seawater was poured, the flames did not extinguish at all. Instead, they burned on the seawater and spread to the surroundings. Soon, the entire pirate ship was ablaze. Chapter 624. We can't wait any longer. The Dragonborn Pirate King saw that the situation was getting worse and his expression was extremely unsightly. He originally thought that it was just an ordinary pirate infighting, that this trip would be easy and comfortable, and that he could even make a fortune. But in the end, he discovered that this wasn't the case at all. The prey they regarded as prey had turned into a dragon in an instant, and it was a real dragon. Such a big dragon was happily flying around in the air. The entire fleet was in complete chaos. Fire crystal cannons ready. Target that magic ship. On the dragon-headed warship, the fire crystal cannons were pushed out by the pirates and quickly aimed at the angry dragon, which was attacking another pirate ship not far away. Fire! Boom! 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 Continuous cannon fire was launched at this moment. Flames flashed from the muzzles and the hot shells quickly smashed towards the angry dragon. Just as they were about to hit the angry dragon, the shells instantly stopped in midair and could no longer descend. A faintly discernible energy barrier appeared under the shells and firmly blocked them. Activate ropes. Ropes that looked like tentacles flew up in an instant and wrapped around the cannonballs in midair. Then, they swung back and forth twice before throwing the cannonballs back. The cannonballs drew a beautiful arc and quickly hit another pirate ship. After paying a large number of casualties, a pirate ship finally arrived near the angry dragon. Then, these pirates launched a jump attack, wanting to directly jump onto the angry dragon. But before they could land, ropes quickly flew out like vipers. In an instant, these pirates were firmly entangled, and then the ropes quickly contracted and strangled them like pythons. The dragonborn pirate king's army started to collapse from the moment they came into contact. The Deepwater Port's navy, whose morale was soaring, became lively after being blessed with all kinds of spells. Originally, there wasn't much difference in their strength, but after being blessed with spells, the strength of the Deepwater Port's navy soared. The enchanted weapons made the fine long swords in their hands even sharper. The pirates basically didn't wear any armor. Even if they did, it was just some leather or iron scale armor. In the face of such weapons, it wasn't much stronger than a piece of paper. Seeing this situation, the pirates picked up their crossbows and javelins to launch long-range attacks. But with the agility granted by the group skill Fox's cunning, these warriors' dodging was very high and they easily dodged. Even if some of them didn't dodge and were hit, they were blocked by the stone-skin spell on their bodies. Under such circumstances, the dragonborn pirate king could only act personally. Moreover, as a pirate king, he also had spellcasters under him. Fireball, Flame Arrow, Acid Arrow, Arcane Missile, Web, Grease. All kinds of low-level spells were quickly thrown out by the casters. Some of the marines who couldn't dodge in time were directly hit by these spells and turned into flames. However, the effect of these low-level spells was very limited and couldn't change the overall situation on the battlefield. Of course, if they cooperated well, using fireball and grease to attack the ship, they could easily ignite a ship. However, as soon as these spellcasters finished casting their spells, they were targeted by Sulen. There are spellcasters? Sulen raised his eyebrows, then waved his hand to summon a thunderbolt and threw it over. Thunderstorm. As soon as the thunderbolt fell on the ship, it spread out in an instant. Most of the space on the ship was covered by thunder and lightning. This thunder and lightning spell wasn't very lethal. It was more to paralyze the enemy and make them lose their ability to move. The pirates were instantly enveloped by thunder and lightning. The pirates didn't even have a chance to resist. They were directly paralyzed by the electricity and fell to the ground. The spellcaster was even more miserable. His physique was obviously lower than the warriors. He was directly electrocuted and fainted on the spot. Rumble. There was a muffled sound of thunder. The huge dragon-headed warship fired wildly, constantly firing shells at the surrounding ships. A 3-meter-tall giant stood at the bow of the ship. He waved a heavy giant axe in one hand. All the marines who wanted to rush up from here were directly killed by his axe on the spot. At this time, he roared at Sulen with bloodshot eyes. Dragon form. With a roar, the dragonborn pirate king underwent a huge change. His originally tall body swelled again, and a group of dragon wings grew behind him. The huge dragon wings directly lifted him up. His originally ferocious hands became like dragon claws. After the dragon form, a faint pressure was transmitted from his body. It was the draconic might. However, the draconic might of the pirate king was obviously weaker than Onyxia's draconic might. The draconic might of the dragonborn pirate king was at most a young dragon. After activating the dragon form, the dragonborn pirate king roared, flapped his wings, and rushed directly toward Sulen. At this time, the dragonborn pirate king had already understood that the defeat of this battle was inevitable. There was only one way to turn the tables, and that was to defeat or kill Sulen. After losing their leader, these soldiers were bound to be in chaos. This was also the only chance for the dragonborn pirate king. Evil aura. Blasphemy. An evil energy field instantly erupted from Sulen's body, and then the dragonborn pirate king rushed toward Sulen with a grin. Su Luan frowned slightly. He could clearly feel that evil power. Then, the power of thunder and lightning quickly spread out from his body. In an instant, Sulen directly opened the thunder domain, and the evil power was directly squeezed back under the effect of his soul domain. The dragonborn pirate king waved the giant axe in his hand and fell from the sky, smashing fiercely at Sulen. It looked like he was going to split Sulen in half. Clang! The deafening sound of metal colliding rang out. Sulen's thunder god's spear swept across and directly blocked the powerful attack of the dragonborn pirate king. Sulen's thunder god's spear swept across. The pirate king, who had just landed, only had time to block with his giant axe, but the master was sent flying with his weapon. A large amount of lightning power appeared on the surface of his body. Lightning flashed, and even the pirate king's strong physique trembled all over. However, in just a breath, the dragonborn pirate king withstood the lightning paralysis. Then, he swung his chain and smashed it again with a roar. Sulen's body moved and instantly appeared near the dragonborn pirate king. The thunder god's spear in his hand directly hit the pirate king's body. The dragonkin pirate king's body flew away like a ball. Su Luan didn't let him off. His body flashed and rushed up again. The dazzling lightning with unstoppable power fiercely stabbed down. The dragonkin pirate king wanted to resist, but all his defenses were vulnerable in front of the divine weapon. In the end, the thunder god's spear directly pierced through his heart. The endless power of thunder and lightning erupted, killing him completely. Chapter 625. With the death of the dragonborn pirate king, the remaining pirates completely lost their will to fight and no longer had any thoughts of resistance. The entire battlefield was filled with their fleeing figures. But where could they run to on the surface of the sea? With the red dragon Onyx patrolling back and forth in the sky and a mutant tiger shark eyeing them covetously in the sea, these pirates had long since lost the chance to escape. In the end, these pirates could only throw down their weapons and surrender in order to survive. The battle ended quickly, and Barbassa was already very familiar with cleaning up the battlefield and settling the captives. However, things were not over yet. After defeating the dragonborn pirate king, they still had to receive the spoils of war and retrieve Sulen's goods. Escorting the surrendered pirates and the captured pirate ships, the entire fleet had a total of 18 ships. They then majestically moved towards Shipwreck Harbor. Seeing the fleet approaching, the pirates left behind in Shipwreck Harbor did not have the slightest thought of resisting and directly threw down their weapons and surrendered. As for those who wanted to resist, after seeing the red dragon hovering in the sky, they directly threw down their weapons and wanted to escape. The appearance of the red dragon caused the entire Shipwreck Harbor to become chaotic. In almost all worlds, the red dragon represented disaster. Every time it appeared, it would be accompanied by a large amount of destruction. Almost every red dragon in the material world had robbed a city or a king. The mountain of wealth in the red dragon lair had basically come from this. Moreover, there was still the red dragon queen in the southern seas. She was the true ruler of the southern seas. Now that the red dragon had suddenly appeared here, could it be related to her? Many people with active minds were secretly wondering if she wanted to take control of this place as well. Arriving at Shipwreck Harbor again, the feeling this time was particularly different. Sulen looked at the flustered Shipwreck Harbor and frowned slightly. He then waved his hand, and Barbassa immediately led the soldiers of Deepwater City to start maintaining order. Very quickly, under the influence of Barbassa and the navy of Deepwater City, the originally chaotic harbor was quickly restored to order. "Where is Norland's lair?" Su Len waved his hand, and several pirate leaders under the dragonborn pirate king Norland immediately stepped forward to answer. "Your Grace, Norland's lair is in the Crystal Palace behind the harbor. Almost all of Norland's wealth is gathered there. Send someone to load all the wealth onto the ship," Su Len said directly. He was here to rob. After defeating the dragonborn pirate king, Shipwreck Harbor was like a weak woman who had lost all ability to resist. It could only wail under the tyrannical Su Len. Su Len did not show any mercy to these pirates. His fleet had almost been completely wiped out. He had spent so much time and effort to build the fleet, and after a few voyages, more than half of them had been killed by the pirates. The pirates of this era were not like the Captain Jack in the movies and novels. These pirates could be said to be committing all kinds of crimes. Murder and arson were the most basic of their crimes. These pirates robbed and killed, forcing captives to jump off the deck into the sea was a common occurrence. It could be said that these pirates should all be hanged according to the law. Under Sullen's order, the soldiers of Deepwater City immediately began to collect the spoils of war. Su Len and his men were not familiar with Shipwreck Harbor, but the pirate captives were. These pirates were very skilled in treachery. They led the soldiers of Deepwater City to rummage through the city's wealth and send it to the ships docked at the harbor. Apart from the pirates, the richest people in Shipwreck Harbor were the black market merchants. These people could be said to be extremely daring, selling their souls for profit. As long as there were benefits, these merchants dared to trade with the devil. All kinds of goods stolen by the pirates were sold by them, and each of them could be said to be overflowing with wealth. Su Len naturally did not intend to let these merchants go. "Carlos, take your men and let these captives lead the way. Go and catch the black market merchants for me. Also, find out how much money these merchants have and bring it to me," Su Luen said to a marine admiral who had just been promoted by him. "Yes, Your Grace." After saying that, he bowed and led a group of soldiers and a few surrendered pirates to capture the black market merchants. Shipwreck Harbor was the largest port among the pirates, and the wealth here was astonishing. Soon, boxes of kinnar were transported over. "Your Grace, the wealth left behind by Norland is astonishing. According to our preliminary estimates, there are at least 1.5 million kinnar, including a large number of gems, precious utensils, and so on. If all of them are converted, it's estimated to be more than 3 million kinnar," Barbassa said excitedly. 3 million kinnar. Su Len could not help but rub his hands. His northern city could be considered to be making a lot of money every day. Sugar, rum, paper, perfume, excellent weapons, and so on, all of these things added up to only a little more than 1 million kinnar a year. After all kinds of expenses, there was not much left. He had only killed one pirate king, but there was actually so much wealth. Su Len immediately wondered if he should kill the other pirate kings as well. However, the other pirate kings did not provoke him. It would not be good to kill them directly. Moreover, these pirate kings also had other forces behind them. If he really did that, it was estimated that the entire southern waters would not do business with him. After thinking about it, Su Len temporarily put aside this tempting idea. "Load all these things onto the ship," Su Len said. 1 or 2 million kinnar were piled up like a small mountain, but the ship Su Len brought could easily fit them. Norland is really a good person. Looking at the wealth piled up in front of him, Su Len kept sighing in his heart. In addition to the gold, Norland also sent a large number of pirate slaves, experience, and treasure chests to Su Len. He was just like a child of wealth. For such a child of wealth, Su Len felt that the more the better. It was not easy to build a floating space city. The cost of building a floating space tower had already cost tens of millions of kinnar, and to build a floating space city, it would cost at least billions of kinnar. Fortunately, Sullen's territory was rich in minerals, and many things could be mined on their own, which saved a lot of expenses. A wizard tower was more than 1,000,000 tons, and the floating space city was at least 10 times larger than the wizard tower. Its weight was at least hundreds of millions of tons. Even if such a behemoth was all made of ordinary steel, it would still be an amazing number if converted to kinnar, not to mention that the main body of the city was obsidian. Chapter 626. Your Excellency the Grand Duke, Your Excellency the Grand Duke, please listen to my explanation. We are honorable merchants. A fat merchant shouted in a panic. Grand Duke, I went to the northern city to give you gifts this year. Please listen to my explanation. I really don't have any money. I just want to earn some hard-earned money. The merchant tried to rush over, but he was very polite. The guard beside him pushed him back and squatted on the ground. Even so, he did not give up struggling. Honest merchant? Sulen glanced at the crying merchant. This guy was wearing a linen shirt. The shirt had been starched until it was a little white. There were even a few patches on it. However, when the guard beside him was tearing it, he tore a hole in his shirt and the silk underwear inside instantly leaked out. Hard-earned money? Sulen looked at him. He could afford silk underwear, but he said he didn't have any money. Carlos, how much money did you find with him? Grand Duke, we searched through his place and only found a few hundred kinnar. Carlos said shamefully when he saw the other people transporting boxes of gold and silver. A few hundred kinnar? Sulen raised his eyebrows. Grand Duke, don't believe his plan. This guy is called Gretel. He is the biggest black market merchant in our shipwreck harbor. Every year, he handles at least a few 100,000 kinnar, a pirate beside him suddenly said. A few 100,000 kinnar? Sulen looked at Gretel. A few 100,000 kinnar, and you say you don't have any money? Grand Duke, it's not just that. The pirates here sell him goods at 30% of the original value. He makes even more after selling these goods. Did you hear that? These pirates are very clear about your income. Sulen said to Gretel. Do you want to hand over the money yourself, or do you want to wait for them to treat you well before handing over the money? Grand Duke, you can't just listen to the words of these pirates. These pirates are treacherous. They commit all kinds of crimes, murder and arson. They are framing me. Gretel argued loudly. You don't want to admit it. Sulen looked at Gretel. He didn't expect Gretel to still be so stubborn even at this point. He really doesn't shed tears until he sees the coffin. But I like this kind of stubborn person. Greg, you don't have to deny it. Since we're already here, it's impossible for us not to bleed. My goods were stolen, and the pirates who robbed me have already paid the price. However, you accomplices haven't. It's not like we're going to make you bankrupt today. You, Gretel, earn at least a few 100,000 kinnar a year here. There's also your fleet and caravan. I'm not sure how much you earn each year. Then let's take a year's worth of your earnings. You've been earning money here for more than a decade. It's not too much to ask for a year's worth of compensation, right? It's not just you. We'll use the same standard for the other black market merchants. You earn 400,000 to 500,000 kinnar a year here. Let's make it 500,000 kinnar. Gretel, take out 500,000 kinnar and I'll pretend nothing happened. You can continue to be a black market merchant here, and I'll take the money back to Northern Town. 500,000 kinnar. That's just a year's worth of your earnings here. It's not too much to ask for, right? Take it out and I'll let you go. I'll also guarantee your safety. If you can't take it out, Sulen lifted Gretel up and smiled at him. He then waved at the soldiers beside him. Then I won't be the one to talk to you. I'll need my men to talk to you. He shouted at the soldiers beside him. What do you think? Okay. How do you plan to talk to him? Su Len asked. The soldiers looked at each other. They didn't seem to know how to talk. Why don't we talk to him on the wooden spikes? One of the soldiers suggested. Let's go with the wooden spikes. The other soldiers responded. Gretel, who was being held up by a few soldiers, turned pale instantly. No, wooden spikes won't work. Su Len shook his head. He wouldn't survive a 2-meter-long wooden spike piercing through his body. Gretel heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Su Len's words. However, before he could finish his sigh of relief, Su Len said again, since wooden spikes won't work, let's use the wooden spikes instead. That's good. As long as you control your strength, you won't have to worry about killing him. Let's use the wooden spikes. We should use the wooden spikes to deal with these unscrupulous merchants. The soldiers shouted when they heard Su Len's words. Su Len turned around calmly and waved at the soldiers beside him. Go, treat our old friend Gretel well. Otherwise, people will say that we're rude. Understood. We'll treat our old friend well. The soldiers around him laughed. Your Excellency, Your Excellency, Your Excellency, please spare my life. Gretel's expression changed when he heard Su Len's words. He cried and tried to pull Su Len away, but the soldier beside him kicked him to the ground. Su Len ignored Gretel. This guy was wearing an old shirt and saying that he had no money. Did he think that he was blind? He had already given him a chance, but he didn't even know how to grasp it. He had earned so much money as a black market merchant over the years. It could be said that every Kinnar was stained with blood. Su Len didn't want their lives. He just wanted them to hand over a year's worth of income. It was too easy for them. Su Len asked the soldiers to find a chair and sat on it. He then waved at the soldiers beside him and signaled for them to continue. Your Excellency, we don't have wooden spikes on our ship, a soldier beside him said. Su Len rolled his eyes and said, we don't have wooden spikes, but what about the pirates? Don't they have any in the pirates' prison? We just can't find any. Ask the pirates to make a few. Yes, Your Excellency. The soldier immediately went to carry out the order. There was also a prison in Shipwreck Bay. It was used to imprison pirates who broke the rules. There were all kinds of torture tools in the prison. Soon, a few pirates brought the torture tools over. Gretel's face turned pale when he saw the blood-stained torture tools. Then, a few soldiers forced him to wear the spikes. Your Excellency, I'll donate. Please ask them to stop. Gretel shouted when he saw that they were serious. Wouldn't it be better if you cooperated earlier? Su Len put down his teacup and smiled. But since you've already brought the spikes, it's not good to just take them off. It's better to let Gretel experience our service. He waved at the soldiers and 2 of them immediately pulled the spikes down. Chapter 627. Amid a series of hysterical screams, Gretel was pinched so hard that he almost died. Finally, after a round of pinching, the soldiers around him finally let him go. Lord Duke, please spare my life. I'll donate. Gretel screamed as he begged for donations. His voice was like a cuckoo crying blood. It was heart-wrenching and tearful. Lord Duke, I'm willing to donate 500,000 Kinnar to make up for your loss, Gretel said without hesitation. That's more like it. Su Len nodded in satisfaction. Mr. Gretel is a good man to be willing to donate 500,000 Kinnar. You are indeed a friend of Beifeng Principality. Quick. What are you doing? Mr. Gretel fell down. Why didn't you help him up? You didn't even know how to control your strength. Su Len reprimanded the soldiers around him. Hurry up and help Mr. Gretel up. A few soldiers immediately went up to Gretel with smiles on their faces and tried to help him up by his arms. "It's not your fault. I lost my balance and fell down. I fell down," Gretel quickly explained. "If that's the case, Mr. Gretel, please hand over the kinnur that you donated." Sulen nodded. 500,000 kinnur is not too much, is it? Not at all, not at all. I'm willing to donate this to Beifeng Principality. Soon, a group of soldiers followed Gretel to an ordinary-looking house. They then opened the cellar in a hidden corner of the house and took out the kinnur that was stored inside. After a while, a caravan carrying 500,000 kinnur slowly walked out. A caravan was needed to carry all these kinnur. Each kinnur weighed 4 grams. 80% of it was gold while the rest was made up of other metals. 500,000 kinnur weighed about 2 tons. It would take 10 caravans to transport all of them. Fortunately, these merchants had prepared a large number of caravans to transport the goods. Each caravan carried a few hundred pounds of kinnur. These kinnur were all packed in boxes. In order to make it easier to transport, each box weighed 100 pounds. There were exactly 4 boxes in a caravan. There were a total of 10 caravans in a row. With Gretel as a demonstration, dealing with the other black market merchants was a walk in the park. After sending kinnur to the port, Sulen waved his hand and said, "Mr. Gretel has donated everything. I'll leave the rest to you." Gretel donated 500,000 kinnur, but he is the biggest businessman in Shipwreck Harbor. The other businessmen have smaller businesses than him, so 500,000 kinnur is a bit too much. We have to calculate his annual income first, and then collect the compensation according to his annual income. Your Excellency, these merchants are used to cheating. If they hide their income, we won't know either. Carlos asked. That's easy. Although we don't know, someone else does. Sulen pointed at the pirates and said, "These pirates have been living here for a long time. Although they don't know the exact income of these merchants, they know all the warehouses and shops. It's enough to calculate. Besides, don't we have an expert here? I'll ask Mr. Gretel to help me calculate it. It'll definitely be accurate." Sulen patted Gretel's shoulder and said, "I'm sure Mr. Gretel will help us with this small matter." "Yes, Your Excellency, I'll definitely help you," Gretel said loudly. "Hurry up and call some of the pirates here. Let them help with the calculation." Sulen waved his hand and said to Carlos. The pirates were very happy to report these black market merchants. After all, these black market merchants opened all kinds of casinos, brothels, and taverns in Shipwreck Harbor and made a lot of money from them. Soon, another black market merchant was brought over by the soldiers. When he saw Sulen, he immediately said, "Your Excellency, it must have been hard on you. I'm willing to give you 5,000 kinnur for a cup of tea." You're quite smart. Sulen looked at the black market merchant in front of him with a smile. But 5,000 kinnur is too stingy. Look, Gretel. He donated 500,000 kinnur. You're still far from it. Sulen shook his head with a look of regret. 500,000 kinnur. The black market merchant was so surprised that he couldn't close his mouth. Yes, 500,000 kinnur. Sulen nodded. However, I won't force you to donate as much as you want. It's all up to you. If you want to be friends with us, then donate more. If you don't want to, then it doesn't matter. Sulen said generously as he patted the black market merchant's shoulder. Just as Sulen was speaking, a few soldiers beside him brought over the prepared pincers. These pincers from the prison were stained with blood and looked a little dirty. Pincers were considered the lightest punishment in the pirates' prison. The pincers were made of 3 pieces of wood that were then strung together with iron bars. Grooves were dug in the middle of the wood. These grooves were where the ankles were placed and were strung together with ropes. When it was used, the prisoner's feet would be placed in the grooves. Then, 2 other people would pull the rope and tighten it. If they were lucky, they would make a frame for the prisoner to lie down. If they were in a bad mood, they would make the prisoner kneel on the ground and torture him. This kind of torture device depended on the size of the opening at the ankles. If the opening was too big, it wouldn't even clamp the ankles. The pincers that the pirates had prepared only had a shallow groove. It didn't feel good to be clamped. In fact, there were 2 other types of pincers. One used sticks as thick as chopsticks that were strung together in a row. This was specially used to clamp fingers. The most ruthless pincers were specially used to clamp the head. This kind of torture device could even crack a person's skull. How could Su Lin use such inhumane torture devices? Your Excellency the Grand Duke, Your Excellency the Grand Duke, I really don't have that much money. A black market merchant screamed. Then, he was grabbed by a few ferocious soldiers as if they were grabbing a chick. Then, they forcefully put torture equipment on him. You dog, you still want to lie to Your Excellency the Grand Duke. A pirate next to him went up and kicked him. You dog, you opened a casino here. You make money like water every day. I alone lose dozens of kinnar in the casino every day. But your casino has at least thousands of customers every day. How much money do you make? This black market merchant was also raised to be a respectable person. When had he ever been treated like this? Garrett, it seems like our merchant doesn't intend to tell the truth. Calculate for him. We're not pirates, we're regular navies. We do things based on evidence and reason. Su Lin waved at Garrett who was beside him. Garrett, who had become a lackey, immediately calculated according to the description of the pirates. It didn't take much effort for him to calculate the black market merchant's annual income. Chapter 628. The casino's daily income is about 3,000 kinnar, but this money needs to be shared with the other pirate kings. In the end, 500 kinnar will fall into his hands, which is about 100,000 kinnar a year. Also, the J Court and the tavern in his hands are also making a lot of money every day. In this way, his annual income is at least 450,000 kinnar. Gretel added up all the income and quickly came up with the annual income of this black market merchant. There are some miscellaneous things, which is about 10,000 to 20,000 kinnar. In that case, let's not be so calculative. Let's calculate according to 450,000. Su Lin directly made the decision. Gretel's calculation was indeed accurate. This black market merchant's annual income was indeed more than 450,000 kinnar, but the more he earned, the more he spent. He needed to maintain the fleet, various fighters, guards, and so on. The expenses were not small, but 450,000 kinnar was definitely something he could afford. Carlotte, I'll leave this to you. Treat him well. Hee, don't say that we're making things difficult for you. Today, no one will be able to escape. You have to take the 450,000 gold coins, even if you don't want to. Now, let us brothers serve you well. Carlotte grinned, revealing a row of white teeth. Your Excellency Grand Duke, I really didn't earn that much money. That money is from the shares of the various pirate kings. I'm just a puppet on the table. I really don't have any money. The black market merchant cried out. Su Lin waved his hand and said, people's hearts are sinister, especially in this kind of pirate den. Do you think I dare to believe you? In comparison, I believe in the trap more. Come on, this is a lie detector. As long as you can pass the lie detector, I'll believe you. As he spoke, a few soldiers beside him carried up the lie detector that they had prepared beforehand. Then, they directly propped up the black market merchants. The lie detector made of iron oak was hard and durable. Su Lin was considerate enough to prepare a bench for the merchants to lie down on during the test. Come, let's try it first. Carlotte directly put the trap on the black market merchant, and then the two soldiers immediately grabbed the rope and exerted force. Ah! The black market merchant immediately let out a heart-wrenching scream. His whole face was red, and the veins on his forehead were bulging. His 2 arms struggled to escape, but he was firmly pressed on the bench by the soldiers. His body twisted back and forth like a worm, but there was no effect. This is just the beginning. The rope is just the most basic. A few soldiers tied the trap tightly, and then stuffed the prepared wooden wedges in to compress the gap. Okay, let's officially start. One of the soldiers stood up, picked up a wooden mallet and said, "Remember, if you agree, say it quickly. Otherwise, it will be too late." "Start the polygraph," Carlos shouted. The 2 soldiers raised their mallets and slammed them down on the wooden wedge without hesitation. Ouch! A far cry from the black market merchant's voice. The black market merchant howled in agony. Even his eyes could be seen protruding out of their sockets. "I'll donate money, 450,000 kinnar. The black market merchant could no longer care about anything else. Seeing that the 2 soldiers were about to hit him again, he quickly cried and shouted. "Look, the lie detector is working again. Why is it so difficult to trust between people?" Sulen said bitterly. "I've already told you so earnestly, but you just don't want to tell me the truth. Now, we've finally reached an agreement." Then, the soldiers put the black market merchant down from the lie detector. Then, they took the carriage that had just been unloaded and followed the black market merchant to his manor. When the other black market merchants saw Sulen's actions, their faces turned ashen, as if they had lost their parents. In the end, they all gave in. One by one, they accepted Sulen's friendship and became friends with Beifeng Duchy. They expressed that they were willing to donate all their income for a year to Beifeng Duchy. Of course, Su Luan couldn't refuse the sincerity of these businessmen. Soon, a large number of kinnar was transported over. The 7 black market merchants donated more than 3 million kinnar to Sulen. In addition to the income of the dragonborn pirate king, just the kinnar alone gave Sulen at least tens of millions of kinnar. Sulen's first fund to build the floating city was finally settled. In addition to the kinnar, after killing the dragonborn pirate king, Sulen also received a lot of rewards. After dealing with the shipwreck harbor, Sulen had time to check the rewards. "Congratulations, host. You have successfully killed a dragonborn sea giant. You have received 53,400 experience points, you have received 1 legendary skill point, you have received 2 platinum treasure chests. The battle is over. You have received the item Sea Giant's Heart Blood *1. Rise of the Navy, Legendary Battle, September 1689 of the Huiyue calendar. Due to the wealth of the deepwater port, it attracted the attention of others, leading to a pirate attack on the fleet. The newly born Huiyue port suffered huge losses. In order to take revenge, Sulen led the fleet to continue the counterattack. You have defeated the Black Shark pirates, the One-Eyed Dragon pirates, and successfully killed the Pirate King in the final battle. You have received a huge reputation in this battle. Reputation +5. Hearing the familiar voice, Sulen opened the storage space and took out the 2 platinum treasure chests. This Pirate King's strength is really weak. 2 platinum treasure chests, not even a diamond. I'll just make do with it. Sulen took out the 2 platinum treasure chests from the storage space and chose to open them directly. After a flash of light, the system prompt sounded in Sulen's ear. "Congratulations, host. You have successfully opened the platinum treasure chest. You have received the item Elemental Furnace Fuel. Congratulations, host. You have successfully opened the platinum treasure chest. You have received the item Legendary Soul Crystal." Sulen looked at the 2 items in front of him, the Elemental Furnace Fuel and the Soul Crystal. As the name suggested, the Elemental Furnace Fuel was used to burn the Elemental Furnace. This type of Elemental Furnace Fuel was not produced much, and it would only appear occasionally in some mines. Although the elemental furnace fuel was less than 1.5 kilograms, it could be used for more than 15 years at full load if used in the elemental furnace. This was good news for Su Len. At least he did not have to look for elemental furnace fuel all over the world. As for the soul crystal, Su Len casually put it away. He planned to let Hathaway build a legendary golem construct with these soul crystals when he went back. A golem construct of this level was a true killer weapon. Chapter 629. The Tower of the North Wind now had several legendary golems, the most powerful of which was the Magic Breaker golem that Su Len had obtained from the ruins. The Magic Breaker statue was a special type of statue. If it had enough energy, it could possess the combat power of an advanced mythic. This was especially true for magic breakers like the Magic Breaker, which had very high magic resistance. The two Magic Breaker blades could even slice through advanced mythic magic barriers. The Magic Breaker was very fast and had a fast attack speed. Even legendary wizards could be killed if they were not careful. It could be said that this thing was completely developed to deal with wizards. Of course, the Magic Breaker was also very powerful against other classes. Its Magic Breaker blade was incomparably sharp, and its body of steel had shockingly high physical defense. It could be said that such a legendary magic puppet was a powerful killing machine. It had the attack power of a grand swordsman of the same level, but it did not have the weakness of a grand swordsman's low defense. If it were not for the expensive cost, it could almost be said to have no shortcomings. After Hathaway got the Magic Breaker golem, she deliberately checked its manufacturing process and the materials needed. Then she calculated that it would cost at least 200 million kinnar to build such a set of golems, and because it required a lot of very rare materials, many times it could not be made even if one had the money. High-level legendary golems were basically impossible to mass-produce. After all, there were too few materials that could be used to make high-level legendary golems. It was said that in the era of the Arcane Kingdom, there was a neutron star golem, which was known as the strongest golem. This golem's combat power was comparable to the gods, but it seemed that until the collapse of the Arcane Kingdom, the neutron star golem had not been successfully developed. When the Arcane Kingdom developed the neutron star golem, they used the gods as a reference, but before they could complete it, the Arcane Kingdom had collapsed. Hathaway had now made 2 diamond golems, which had a challenge rating of 21. It was the weakest of the legendary golems, but even the weakest golem was very powerful. In the face of a diamond golem, if one did not have good enough weapons, it was better to run away as soon as possible. After the diamond golem in the Tower of the North Wind cooperated with the Tower Spirit, the challenge rating would be further improved. Originally, without the diamond golem, the challenge rating of the Wizard Tower was 21. With the diamond golem, the challenge rating of the Wizard Tower directly reached 25, which was close to the edge of high-level legendary. For the diamond golem, Hathaway also made some optimizations, reducing the weight of the golem and strengthening its defense and attack power. Now Hathaway was studying another legendary golem. Although the diamond golem was powerful, it could not fly. It was not good to deal with some powerful flying creatures, such as dragons. Hathaway was ready to build a few legendary golems with flying ability. Golem could be used for enchantment. Its effect was roughly equivalent to the blood of the frost giant chieftain he had killed before, but the amount was much smaller. This bottle of blood could at most be used by one person. After using it, a Tier 4 warrior would obtain a transformation effect. It could be considered a pseudo-legendary rank, possessing legendary combat power, similar to Boulder and Johnson among the barbarians. Su Len intended to use this bottle of blood as a reward and let his subordinates use their points to exchange for it. Boulder and Johnson had now reached the peak of their power. After transforming, their combat power would increase to the legendary rank. Given some time, they would almost be able to cross the boundary of mortals and become true legendary powerhouses. After sorting out the things, Su Lan also obtained a legendary skill point this time. However, his other skills had not yet been upgraded to the advanced level. It would be a waste to use this legendary skill point, so he could only put it aside for the time being. The transportation work at Shipwreck Harbor lasted for a day. At the same time, Su Lan also had people raid Cyclops' lair. In Cyclops' lair, hundreds of thousands of Kinnar were also found. In addition to the harvest at Shipwreck Harbor, Su Lan had almost obtained tens of millions of Kinnar this time. After all the materials were transported to the ship, Su Lan looked back at Shipwreck Harbor, then waved goodbye reluctantly. This place had given him too much. When they came out, there were 3 ships, and when they returned, there were 18 ships. At the same time, there were also a large number of pirate captives. It could be said that Deepwater City had become rich from this wave. On the way back, Su Lan did not encounter any more pirates. After all, after such a long time, the news of him killing the Dragonborn Pirate King had spread throughout the surrounding waters. No pirate dared to appear in front of him. It took a week for the 18 ships to return to Deepwater City. When the fleet returned, the whole city was in an uproar. Among the 18 ships, several of the best hull structures were assigned to the Navy, but these armed merchant ships still needed to be strengthened before they could enter the Navy for service. As for the remaining ships, they would be converted into armed merchant ships and used for ocean trade. The Cyclops pirates, the Tigeshark pirates, and the pirates under the Dragonborn Pirate King also needed to be trained. These pirate captives added up to an astonishing 1,500 people, and now the number of Navy in Deepwater City was less than 500 people. Without sullen suppression, these pirates would not be so obedient. For these pirates, Su Lan gave them 2 choices. One was to become slaves in Deepwater City. After working here for 3 years, they could obtain the status of a free person and live an ordinary life. The other was to join the Navy. However, whether joining the Navy or becoming a slave, they needed to go to the prison in the city to learn. In order to avoid these pirates from causing trouble in Deepwater City. In fact, Su Lan thought too much. These pirates had seen Sullen's power with their own eyes, especially when he could summon a dragon and a magic ship. After defeating the Pirate King, they were even more in awe of him. In the end, 300 of the 1,500 pirate captives decided not to join the Navy, but to become slaves. After 3 years of work in Deepwater City, they would obtain the status of a free person and start a new life. Although the pirates drank big bowls of wine, ate big mouthfuls of meat, and spent a lot of money, in fact, they also wanted a stable life. Therefore, after Su Lan promised that these pirates could retire after a few years of service, they were very surprised and their morale was high. Chapter 630. It had been a month since Su Lan returned to Northtown City. The wealth he brought back this time had been used to buy all kinds of materials. With such a large amount of money, the price of the surrounding magic materials had risen a little. The one with the lowest price was the little red dragon, Onyx Via. Originally, the little red dragon had hoped that the Kinnar would be put into the treasury or given to her. In the end, Su Lan had spent it all, which made the little red dragon lose sleep. Fortunately, there was still a lot of Kinnar in the treasury. Otherwise, the little red dragon would have been furious. In the secret plane, Su Lan, Hathaway, and Alex were experimenting. A huge silver-white ring was placed on the ground. On this ring, there were countless strange runes engraved. The ground was paved with pure white marble. This place had been completely transformed into a large testing ground. At this time, Hathaway and Alex were standing on both sides of the ring. The 2 legendary wizards floated in mid-air. Powerful mana made their wizard robes bulge. Sullen's figure stood on the other side. The lightning energy on his body had been activated, and endless lightning surrounded him. Su Lan, Hathaway, and Alex were testing the giant floating ring in front of them. This was a super large floating ring that Hathaway and Alex had finally created after several optimizations. This floating ring was much larger than the ones used in wizard towers. It was used to install in the floating city. If the experiment was successful and proved that this floating ring could be used, then they could first determine the size of the floating city. "Are you ready?" Hathaway asked. "It's done." Su Luan and Alex nodded. "Good, then let's begin." Hathaway nodded. "Su Len, if anything goes wrong, immediately open an energy barrier and cut off the energy link of the floating ring. Testing the floating ring requires Alex and I to be fully focused. If there's a mistake in our design, it could lead to serious consequences and damage the floating ring. This thing is too expensive to make. We don't have that much money to make a new one. Remember, you must cut off the energy link as soon as possible." Su Len nodded with a serious expression. "Don't worry, leave it to me. If there is any problem, I will cut off the energy supply immediately. Also, you two have to be careful. If you can't avoid it, then protect yourself first. If the floating ring is damaged, we can continue to make it." "Okay." Hathaway and Alex nodded at Su Len. "Let's begin." As soon as Hathaway's voice fell, a spiritual light rose from the werewolf's body. Then, a powerful mana rose from the two of them. As the powerful mana surged, the runes on the floating ring began to light up one by one. 2 powerful mana surged from the two of them and entered the floating ring. The powerful mana flowed quickly, creating a circle of energy vortex around them. As the runes lit up one after another, finally, all the runes on the floating ring in front of them flickered with spiritual light. When all the runes lit up, a powerful force was transmitted from the floating ring. This force acted on the surroundings, and the ground around them began to shake slightly. This shaking did not weaken as time passed. Instead, it became stronger and stronger. Rumble. A huge figure emerged from the ground. Under this amazing force, the ground under everyone's feet seemed to turn over like an earth dragon. The ground was like an earthquake, and the powerful force was transmitted in all directions. With Hathaway and Alex as the center, everything within 300 meters of them shook violently. Finally, this force formed a huge circular energy field. Within this field, the ground was forcibly separated by this force. The entire ground was forcibly lifted by an endless force. The surrounding energy field was also distorted. On this part of the ground, the original gravity had completely disappeared. The gravity on this piece of land had been completely cut off. The floating ring was actually controlling gravity. By controlling gravity, the floating city could float in the air. There were many kinds of technology needed to build a floating city. Gravity was only one of them. In fact, a qualified floating city was like a miniature world. The top few topics in this world were the half-plane transformation technology, also known as Genesis, the floating city technology, the neutron star golem technology, and so on. Building a floating city required changing the internal structure, changing space, riddles, ecological systems, and so on. With Hathaway and Alex's magic transmission, this piece of land successfully lifted off the ground and flew up. Because of the spread of this force, many of the surrounding rocks had already flown up. Tower Spirit 1, begin collecting all kinds of data from the floating ring. As the floating ring stabilized, Hathaway immediately said. The Tower Spirit, which had already been prepared, immediately scanned. A red light swept over, and the Tower Spirit's voice sounded. Energy transmission normal. The floating ring is operating normally. Current operation rate is 50%. Current experimental results have been achieved. A huge piece of land with a diameter of more than 400 meters and a thickness of more than 2 meters was easily lifted up by the floating ring. After Hathaway and Alex waited for a while, this piece of land finally calmed down and then began to slowly rise. Now, this piece of land had risen more than 20 meters and was still rising. With the passage of time, under the guidance of the floating ring, the entire piece of land had risen to a height of 500 meters. Under the effect of the floating ring, this island was like a floating island. It's a success, Su Len said excitedly. Hathaway and Alex were also overjoyed and secretly relieved. Energy transmission stable. Begin recording experimental data. Calculating the weight of the floating ring, scanning the floating ring's status. Calculating the floating ring's energy consumption. Calculating the floating ring's energy conversion rate. Rays of light flashed continuously. The tower spirit was calculating the specific data of the floating ring. Hathaway and Alex continued to inject magic into the floating ring. It was not easy to maintain such a large floating ring. Hathaway and Alex began to guide the energy of the elemental pool after the floating ring was operating normally. Otherwise, it would be difficult to rely on the two of them to inject magic. After all, the floating ring's energy consumption was very high. Chapter 631. As Tower Spirit Number 1 continued to scan and record data, Hathaway and Alex began to operate more on the floating space ring. The floating space ring used on the floating space city had to deal with a lot of bad situations, so the floating space tower had stricter requirements. Rumble. There was a loud rumbling sound, and some cracks suddenly appeared in the middle of the huge piece of land that was originally floating in the sky. Cracks began to appear on the originally flat ground. The anti-gravity force field of the floating space ring is in disorder. The force field is deviated, and the land is broken. Scanning for the cause of the force field deviation. Tower Spirit Number 1 immediately scanned the surroundings, and Hathaway and Alex immediately controlled the energy output. Scanning complete, the 39th rune design has deviated, causing the anti-gravity force field in the area to deviate after reaching a certain value, and it will interfere with the surrounding force field. Hathaway was slightly relieved. It's not a big problem, we'll modify it after the experiment, and now continue the test. Okay. Su Len nodded, and then the test continued. Then Hathaway and Alex continued to control the floating space ring and began to conduct other tests. The floating space ring controlled the piece of land and began to move slowly, and the huge piece of land slowly moved back and forth under the influence of the floating space ring. Tower Spirit Number 1 constantly scanned and recorded the floating piece of land. The land has an unknown vibration in the horizontal state. Cracks appear in the land. The anti-gravity force field is tilted in the descending state. The anti-gravity force field is deviated in the fast horizontal movement, and slight cracks appear in the land. The energy efficiency of the floating space ring is 63.7% on average. Soon, all the tests of the floating space ring were over, and Hathaway and Alex controlled the floating space ring to descend slowly. Although there were many problems in the test, overall, it was very good. This time, the floating space ring held up a large area of land, and although it was still some distance away from the floating space city, the test was considered a success. The weight of the land held up this time was calculated by Tower Spirit Number 1, and it was almost more than 3 million tons, which was heavier than the floating space tower. Furthermore, this was not the limit of the floating ring. If the floating ring were to operate at full capacity, the power output would be very high. The energy of the elemental pool in the Arcana realm was not enough to support the test. As for Hathaway and Alex, they had to bear a lot of pressure. As Hathaway and Alex slowly reduced the energy supply, the floating island began to descend slowly, finally stopping 3 meters in the air. At this height, they needed to be careful if they wanted to continue descending. Sullen's energy was quickly released and enveloped the entire floating island. Prepare to land. Prepare to cut off the energy of the elemental pool. Prepare to count down. 10, 9, 8, increase the magic output. It has reached the critical point. Begin landing. The floating island trembled slightly before descending steadily. After a series of noises, the huge floating island slowly landed on the ground. Success! Hathaway breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that our theory is correct. Next, we need to make various improvements to this gigantic floating ring. Alex said. Yes. Although it's a success, there are still many problems with the floating ring. For example, the energy conversion efficiency is only 63.7%. You should know that the floating ring in the Tower of the Northern Winds has an energy conversion efficiency of more than 95%. This difference is more than 30%. We need to optimize it again. There's also the energy field deviation that occurred during the test. These problems need to be solved. Otherwise, even if the floating ring flies, it will fly in a slanted direction. I've already noted it down. We'll make changes when we get back. Sulen slowly retracted his energy. When they were descending, he had released a large amount of energy to protect the entire floating island. We need to upgrade the energy center as soon as possible. Sulen said. We plan to build a floating ring that can accommodate 50,000 to 100,000 people. This is the level of a medium-sized floating ring. The current elemental fission furnace cannot support such a large floating ring. Got it. Hathaway made a face at Sulen. The theoretical verification of the elemental fusion furnace has been completed, but some of the materials required are very high. We don't have a good solution yet. We need materials that can withstand high temperatures. Materials with high magic conductivity are not so easy to make. I don't know what materials the Arcanists used. Alex said with some curiosity. Anyway, it should be a very magical material. The gap between the current wizard civilization and the arcane empire is still very big. In terms of magic material science, magic theory, magic energy use, and supermagic characteristics, they can't be compared at all. Just like in the arcane empire era, the high-grade golems they used could basically self-recover. The main reason for this was the use of a kind of memory metal. After this memory metal is formed, if it is damaged, it will quickly recover. In the Arcane Empire era, those high-grade golems were notoriously difficult to deal with. It was only after the Arcane Empire era disappeared that golems that could self-recover could not be made because of the lack of key materials. Since then, golems made of other materials slowly began to become popular. Speaking of which, the memory metal is also a very important secret of the Arcane Empire. Wizards have more or less obtained this kind of memory metal golems in the ruins, but even knowing the location of today's memory metal golems, they still haven't been cracked. Sulen smiled slightly. Don't think so much. When I have the chance, when I go to the secret realm again, I'll see if I can get you a memory metal golem. That's great. I've only heard of these memory metal golems in some information. I haven't really seen them yet. When the time comes, even if I can't crack the secret of the memory metal, I can still understand some of them. Hathaway said excitedly. Don't think so much. Now let's improve the floating ring. Alex interrupted the conversation between the two. Now this kind of floating ring consumes a lot of energy. Although the elemental fission furnace can also support a city with a scale of 50,000 to 100,000 people, even the most radical arcanists won't consume more than half of their power to maintain the floating state of the city. The floating city requires a lot of energy, but the energy consumption must be kept below 20%. Otherwise, it can't afford the energy consumption of the floating city. Chapter 632. The elemental fission furnace could indeed be used as the energy core of a floating space city, but it could only drive a miniature floating space city. This kind of floating space city was larger than a floating space tower and could accommodate 5,000 to 10,000 people. The floating space city Sulen intended to build was a medium-sized floating space city. This kind of floating space city was the most numerous floating space city in the era of the Arcane Empire. A large floating space city was a floating space city with more than 100,000 people. The upper limit of this kind of floating space city could reach an astonishing 300,000 people. Its combat power was amazing, and it was the most powerful strategic weapon in the era of the Arcane Empire. This kind of floating space city required the use of mice energy nuclei as the energy core. In the era of the Arcane Empire, only mice energy nuclei could drive a floating space city of this scale. However, with the fall of the Arcane Empire, the manufacturing process of mice energy nuclei had long disappeared. Not to mention this kind of large floating space city, even a miniature floating space city had never appeared. The great arcanists in the era of the Arcane Empire also studied a substitute for mice energy nuclei, which was the element annihilation furnace. This kind of element annihilation furnace provided a huge amount of energy, thousands of times more than elemental fusion. It could easily lift a large floating space city. The arcanists even designed a giant floating space city. The concept of a giant floating space city had been around for a long time. Several mice energy nuclei were arranged according to the arrangement of the energy matrix, and then the giant floating space city was lifted. However, the great arcanists soon discovered that building this kind of giant floating space city was not worth the cost. A giant floating space city could accommodate 500,000 people, but it required 4 to 5 mice energy nuclei. However, if used separately, 4 to 5 large floating space cities were more practical than this kind of giant floating space city. Therefore, this kind of giant floating space city was soon abandoned. Now, the floating space ring of North City could theoretically lift a land with a diameter of 800 to 1,000 meters into the sky, which was basically equivalent to connecting the surface of a miniature floating space city. If the current city of North Wind Principality was calculated, a city of this size would at most be a town. This area was really nothing. During the era of the Arcane Empire, few people would build this kind of floating space city. This size of floating space city was from the age of thorium. At that time, the floating city's energy transmission efficiency was low, and the floating ring technology used was very limited. Any of the famous floating cities of the Arcane Kingdom had an area of more than 10 square kilometers. Basically, the entire North Town city and a large amount of surrounding farmland were lifted into the air. Hathaway and Alex continued to make adjustments to the floating ring. Some of the runes on the floating ring needed to be removed. Then, it was replaced with another rune inscription. At the same time, with the help of the Tower Genie, Hathaway and Alex started adjusting the anti-gravity field after the activation of the floating ring. There were some problems with the anti-gravity energy on the floating ring, and there were repeated problems in some areas. This was also the reason for the crack in the center of the floating island. If he didn't make any adjustments, there would be some problems when he used the floating city. Of course, the entire floating city was made of obsidian, so it was very resistant to stretching. There wouldn't be any cracks like the previous floating island experiment, but after a long time, there would definitely be problems, and it would also consume a lot of energy for nothing. After Hathaway and Alex continued their research, Sulen left North Town City and came to the underground world. The underground world had been controlled by the little succubus Chrissy. The underground world was a raw material base in the Duchy of North Wind. It was rich in all kinds of ores and a large number of magic gems. The little succubus with amazing charm could easily enslave these underground creatures. This kind of enslavement was much better than the enslavement of the wizards. Now, just Chrissy alone could easily enslave tens of thousands of underground creatures. As the elemental tide became stronger and stronger, the planar barrier of the main material world began to weaken gradually. This wasn't a good thing. The weakening of the planar barrier of the main material world would lead to some powerful creatures from other worlds entering the main material world. According to the news sent by the Imperial Secret Service, there was an amazing sandstorm in the Desert Kingdom, covering the sky and the sun. It was like the end of the world, and there were many elemental creatures in Icewind City in the north. There were reports of a large number of mutant beasts in many places. Some people even found traces of devils. The south had always been very popular with all kinds of devils and demons. When there were more people, they could do something. The elemental tide had a great impact on this world. Sulen was making some preparations for the floating city. He was going to build a half-plane. It wasn't easy to create a half-plane. It required a very high level of basic knowledge, such as plane knowledge, spatial knowledge, elemental knowledge, ecological knowledge, and so on. Under normal circumstances, this kind of knowledge could only be seen when one reached a very high level. Sulen had a photographic memory. After this period of learning, he finally met the requirements of building a half-plane. After reaching the legendary level, wizards would have the ability to create half-planes. Sulen didn't care much before. But now that he was preparing to build the floating city, he naturally had to bring the half-plane. With Sulen's current strength, creating a world was too easy. If it was a god, creating a half-plane wasn't very difficult. Gods had the talent of changing reality. As long as they put in a little effort, their lives would be relatively comfortable. The half-plane needed to form an elemental circuit, forming a simple ecological cycle inside. Sulen took out the thunder god's spear, which was brought back by Sulen himself. The divine weapon, the thunder god's spear, shone with a dazzling light. Sulen gently stroked, and a spatial crack suddenly appeared in the original space. The crack quickly expanded. Sulen's figure flashed and had already passed through the crack. It was a deep darkness, and there was no light around. Sulen's figure stood in the void, the thunder god's spear in his hand flashing. The dazzling lightning cut through the darkness, and then a small space appeared in front of him. Infinite power of thunder and lightning spewed out from Sulen's body, and the half-plane that was shaking suddenly stopped. The half-plane still needed to be connected to the 4 elemental planes and rely on the 4 elemental planes to stabilize this half-plane. Only when this place was completely stabilized would it no longer be needed. A divine light emerged from Sulen's body, followed by dazzling lightning. The half-plane, which was originally only a dozen square meters in size, began to expand rapidly. It only took about a few minutes for this half-plane to expand to 300 meters. Then Sulen waved the thunder god's spear and stroked it hard. A spatial passage appeared in front of him. Chapter 633. A golden bolt of lightning flashed across the dark world. The dark world was illuminated by this bolt of lightning. After the expansion of the half-plane ended, the space inside had reached a diameter of 500 meters. After the half-plane expanded to this size, the space barrier at the edge began to tremble slightly, and some areas even showed signs of collapsing. Seeing this, Sulen decisively stopped the expansion of the half-plane. Then, a ray of light rose from his body. Mana reshaping plus space construction. A pale golden brilliance flickered, and a golden light appeared on the space barrier of the half-plane. The planar barrier that was showing signs of collapsing instantly stabilized. The newly established demiplane was completely empty. Apart from Sulen, there was nothing else. If he wanted to enrich the demiplane, he would have to connect the 4 elemental planes and extract elemental energy, or he could directly connect the demiplane to the prime material plane. Although the demiplane was only 500 meters in radius, it would continue to grow with the input of energy. These demiplanes could even grow to a state not inferior to the prime material plane. Of course, the amount of energy needed to grow to this extent could be said to be an astronomical figure, and it would also take an astonishing amount of time. Perhaps only those large wizard organizations had the time and energy to cultivate a half-plane to a state close to the main material plane. Sulen looked at the empty half-plane, then drew a line in the air with the thunder god's spear in his hand. A powerful force instantly broke the space barrier. Planar channel. Open. A pale golden brilliance was released from Sulen's body, and an energy channel suddenly appeared in the originally dark and deep void. As the energy channel opened, a gust of wind element appeared in this half-plane. Air started appearing in the originally empty demi-plane. Wisps of wind blew, and as the wind elemental plane was connected, thin air appeared in the demi-plane. Lifeforms could barely breathe here and didn't need to rely on spells for internal breathing. However, although there was air, this half-plane was still empty. Next, Sulen connected to the earth elemental plane again. An invisible gravity appeared here, and at the same time, traces of soil began to appear in the originally empty half-plane. As the earth elemental plane continued to input energy into the half-plane, soil began to quickly appear in this half-plane. The soil was very barren and unsuitable for planting. Only when the earth element reached a certain concentration would the soil slowly become fertile. A breeze blew, and the air was slightly moist. After the water elemental plane was connected, this half-plane was no longer dry. Streams of water began to gather quietly. As the water elemental energy continued to increase, a new small lake appeared in the half-plane. With air, water, and land, this half-plane was not considered complete. The temperature in the half-plane was very low. The temperature of a newly formed half-plane was about the same as the temperature of the astral plane. Ordinary people could not survive here at all. This was also why Sulen and the others had long surpassed the boundary of ordinary creatures and become extraordinary. A ray of light appeared in the demi-plane, and then the temperature of the ice-cold demi-plane slowly rose. Some light also appeared in the originally dark demi-plane. As the half-plane and the four elemental planes completed the connection, a strange power of law also shrouded the half-plane. Then a plane barrier appeared and covered this half-plane. With the plane barrier, this half-plane became Sulen's private space. If others wanted to enter, they had to get Sulen's permission. If Sulen did not agree, even gods could not enter. In fact, building a half-plane was very similar to a god creating a kingdom, but a god's kingdom was much larger than Sulen's. Gods used divine power to create their kingdoms, which was much more powerful than wizards. For example, they only needed to say that there should be light, and there would be light in the kingdom. If they said that there should be land, there would be land. In a god's kingdom, there was indeed nothing they could not do. As long as there was enough divine power, a god's kingdom could be built very quickly. Sulen's half-plane now looked very simple. Even the most barren place in the material world was better than this. Although it was very simple, Sulen was very happy. He was the one who created this world. As long as he continued to modify it, the half-plane would change according to his wishes. Modifying a plane was a very large project. It required a lot of knowledge. Without enough knowledge, there would be a lot of problems in the half-plane created in the end. The proportion of the various elements in the half-plane needed to be carefully adjusted. Too much of any element would affect the half-plane. The wind element was very important to the half-plane. He decided whether other creatures could survive in the half-plane. After all, normal creatures still needed to breathe, and the oxygen content had to reach a certain standard. Many adepts had failed miserably at this step back in the day. Since ancient times, there were many legendary wizards who could create half-planes. However, there were very few who could make a half-plane almost the same as a material plane. The four elemental channels had been connected. Next, the elemental energy began to flow into the half-plane. The growth of the half-plane required the efforts of the creator. They had to use their own power to guide the energy and let it grow. When the elemental energy in the half-plane reached a certain level, it was time to plan the space. This was very crucial. The direction of the half-plane's growth had to be determined at this time. The creator could plan the half-plane. For example, creating some mountains and rivers, where the water would flow, where it would end up, and how the weather would change in the half-plane. This kind of modification required a lot of knowledge. If there was not enough knowledge, it would lead to very serious consequences. For example, some half-planes had problems with the water element. In the end, the whole plane would turn into a desert with sand everywhere. Or the fire element would overflow and turn the half-plane into a volcanic belt. Volcanoes would erupt everywhere, turning the half-plane into an abyss. Some half-planes had low temperatures, and the whole plane would enter an ice age with thick layers of ice everywhere. Sullen's half-plane was going to be installed on the floating city. It would be used to grow all kinds of crops. After all, the space in the floating city was limited. With this half-plane, it would become the floating city's logistics base. Many floating cities could roam in the astral plane for thousands of years. Other than energy, the half-plane of the floating city could produce all kinds of things. P.S. I recommend this book, Old God's Ruler, by Akina-san. It's very boring, so don't worry. Chapter 634. Transforming a demiplane was a technical job. Any mistake could lead to serious consequences. Even the gods would be very careful when transforming their kingdoms. When different types of energy met, they would have different changes. For example, fire and earth elements could create magma. Magma could cause volcanoes to erupt. Metal veins could be added, or land could be added. When wind and fire elements fused together, there would be a monsoon. Then, there would be cold air and hot air. When the cold air and hot air met, they would form wind. If the water element was fused together, it would become rain. If Su Luan wanted the demiplane to grow, then he needed to understand this knowledge as well as make detailed calculations. This kind of calculation required a lot of work. Fortunately, Su Luan already had 3 tower spirits. With the 3 tower spirits working together, the calculation speed would be much faster. The creation of a demiplane was not something that could be done in a short time. After connecting the 4 elemental planes, Su Len left the demiplane and returned to North Town. The demiplane would slowly grow as it absorbed elemental energy. Su Len only needed to guide it. When the demiplane grew to a certain level, he would do other things. Demiplanes were basically useless right now. They could only be used as a storage space to store things. Only when the demiplane grew to a certain level would it be transformed. Many legendary wizards would transform their demiplanes into storage spaces or other things like laboratories or fortresses. There were very few who would transform their demiplanes into material planes. After all, it would take a lot of time and money. Liches usually liked to transform their demiplanes into fortresses or castles and move their wizard towers inside. This way, they would not be disturbed and could study spells in peace. Liches were not necessarily evil creatures. Many liches were neutral, and many wizards would turn into liches for the sake of magic research. After all, in theory, liches could exist as long as they were not killed. There were many demiplanes in the astral plane. Some of them were created by the laws of the multiverse. Others were left behind by other wizards. There were even some fallen kingdoms in the astral plane. These places were the favorite of the astral plane explorers. Such semi-planes or fallen divine kingdoms usually had some good stuff. Over the long years, from the beginning of the Silver Age to the later era of the Arcane Empire, until now, the strong people born in the material plane had never given up on the exploration of the astral world. There were many things that couldn't be found in the material plane, but there were many in the astral world. These experts who explored the astral world were also known as astral world explorers. One of the prerequisites for becoming an astral world explorer was to be a legend. Although legendaries could enter the astral plane, most of the time, only high-level legendaries could become explorers of the astral plane. After all, there were many dangers in the astral plane, and even legendary wizards were not safe here. Legendaries could only conduct limited exploration near planets or material planes. Only high-ranking legendaries could adventure in the astral plane for a long time. After the astral world explorer was the astral world traveler. At this level, It meant that he was very powerful and could travel for a long time in the astral world or go to other planes. These astral travelers were also known as astral merchants. They would trade with each other when they traveled to other planes. These astral world travelers often had many good things in their hands. The profits of the astral boundary caravans were astonishing. Basically, every astral merchant was filthy rich. As for the highest level astral world traveler, it had been a long time since they appeared. These experts could basically move freely in the astral world. Even if they encountered demons, evil gods, or abominations, they could easily deal with them and escape unscathed. The light of dawn illuminated the earth. Chris slowly woke up from her sleep. She moved her arm that was a little uncomfortable, then sat up and stretched. A few rays of sunlight penetrated the curtains and reflected her amazing curves. She had just woken up from her dream and was still a little dazed. Although the legendary succubus was already very strong, she was still far from being Sullen's opponent. However, compared to the others, her current state was obviously much better. Hathaway and Alex were still a little tired. After all, as wizards, their physical fitness was even stronger than that of an ordinary legendary warrior, let alone Sulen. "Is it morning already?" Alex rubbed her eyes and asked as she got up. "It's 9 o'clock. Do you want to sleep for a while more?" "Don't worry, the master has already left." Chris gently lifted Alex's delicate chin with her slender fingers and teased. "Nah, I still have some unfinished experiments." Alex gently slapped Chris's arm away and yawned as she got up from the bed. "Sister Hathaway. You still have unfinished experiments on your side? Do you want to come with me?" Alex shook Hathaway next to her and said. Hathaway stretched her body beautifully. Her beautiful curves were enviable. She was also a little tired, so after hearing Alex's voice, she casually agreed. "A third of the elemental fusion furnace is already completed. The rest will take at least 2 or 3 months, Hathaway said. Now that the Northwind Tower had a few legendary wizards, the progress of their research had greatly increased. "I think we should make another tower spirit. We have too much research going on right now. Most of the time, we need a tower spirit to calculate and record." "That is indeed necessary, but we don't have any legendary soul crystals right now. We need to ask Sulen for one. Let's ask Sulen later. We need an auxiliary tower spirit." Right, the floating city would definitely need more than one tower spirit in the future. Luckily, Sulen had a few legendary soul crystals, which would be enough. "By the way, have you completed the elemental annihilation furnace?" Alex suddenly asked. "This kind of high-grade elemental furnace is too difficult. Right now, I only have some theoretical knowledge." Hathaway shook her head and said. The few of them quickly changed their clothes and got up, then went to the wizard tower to work. At this time, Sulen was suppressing the god's corpse in the secret area. During this time, he would come here every once in a while to extract divinity from the god's corpse. The god's corpse had very high divinity. Although part of it had been absorbed by the god's abomination, the remaining divinity was still shockingly high. After some simple calculations, Sulen estimated that there were about 20 points of divinity left in the god's corpse. With so much divinity, if Sulen absorbed all of it, it would be more than enough to directly upgrade to a weak divine power. Chapter 635. Although it was not the first time that Sulen had stood near this corpse, he still felt a sense of awe. This awe came from the depths of his bloodline. It was the awe that mortals had for gods. Although Sulen was already a demigod, he was not a god. It was unknown how long the god's corpse had been dead, but it still contained some vitality. The god's corpse was broken. Because it had once given birth to an abomination, most of the vitality in the god's corpse had been extracted by the abomination. Now, the remaining power could no longer give birth to another abomination. The corpse, which was more than 30 meters long, lay quietly on the ground. It exuded a sense of oppression, and there was still a residual divine power on the surface of its body. In addition to this divine power, the corpse was also shrouded in the power of death and decay, which was emitted after the death of a god. Sullen's body flashed, and then his body flew up gently. This ancient god's corpse must have died quite miserably. There were many wounds on the corpse, and the most serious injury was on the head. The head of this corpse was severely injured, and half of its head was missing. Ancient gods were very powerful. Although they had been dead for thousands or even tens of thousands of years, they still retained a fragment of consciousness. If one used telepathy to communicate with this corpse, it would talk about the glory of the ancient gods in a strange tone and a special language. The birth of the world, the emergence of the multiverse, the ancient gods of order began to rule the world. In the lower planes, endless chaotic rules and consciousness also appeared, and the birth of the first generation of chaos demons. There was even some information about the origin of demons. In its narration, demons did not originate from the bottomless abyss. They seemed to have migrated from another place. Sometimes, Su Luan wanted to know more secrets, but unfortunately, this god's corpse didn't have any consciousness. The remnant fragments of consciousness were more like an NPC, and they just kept repeating these things. Dazzling golden light slowly emitted from the corpse. Su Len gently touched it, and the golden light converged into a beam of light that was slowly extracted. Extracting divinity from the corpse of an ancient god was not as easy as extracting it from an abomination. Su Len had to fight against the corpse of the ancient god. After all, the divinity originally belonged to this ancient god. Although the ancient god had fallen, the divinity would resist anyone other than the ancient god. Su Len needed to remove all the remaining consciousness in the divinity. Energy absorption. Sullen's body floated in the air as the enormous energy formed a torrent of magic power. He reached out and grabbed the ancient god's corpse, and the pale golden energy was forcibly extracted by him. The god power surrounding the god's spirit suddenly surged. Sullen's extraction of the god's divinity triggered the ancient god's instinctive reaction. Fortunately, the ancient god had already fallen. Although its resistance was strong, it still could not stop Su Len. The faint golden light slowly flowed towards Su Len like a trickle. Above the golden light, there was also a feeling of death, madness, and destruction. These forces had to be removed carefully. This was the terrible evil and hatred born after the death of a god. The abominations were born because of the accumulation of this power. However, because the ancient god's corpse had given birth to the abomination, 70% to 80% of the power of hatred and destruction had been consumed. This power was carefully separated by Su Len, and the rest was absorbed. However, although this power was separated, there were still some remnants. After every extraction of the god's divinity, Su Len needed time to remove the remaining evil thoughts. The wisdom tree had the ability to purify, so under normal circumstances, after extracting the god's divinity, he would come to the wisdom tree in the mystery land to purify it. So far, this method was the most efficient and safest. In fact, if the wisdom tree evolved into the legendary tree of life or the world tree, purifying these evil thoughts would be done by just moving its branches. Unfortunately, the wisdom tree had a long way to go before it could evolve. A faint golden energy appeared in front of Su Len. This golden energy was the power of the god's divinity. Su Len gently waved his hand, and the power of the god's divinity was integrated into Sullen's body. As soon as the power of the god's divinity entered Sullen's body, the golden energy began to slowly integrate into his soul under the guidance of the lightning power. The power of the god's divinity was very special. This kind of power could integrate with any power in the multiverse. As traces of the god's divinity entered his body, Sullen's soul soon felt bloated. After sensing the changes in his soul, Su Len immediately stopped. If he continued to extract the god's divinity, his body would not be able to integrate. It would just be a waste. The faint golden energy beam was cut off, and the god's divinity returned to the god's corpse. The strange scene around him also slowly disappeared. As some of the god's divinity was extracted, the glow on the god's corpse seemed to have dimmed a little. The god's corpse also had a trace of decaying aura. Su Len resisted the urge to destroy and resealed the space used to seal the god's corpse. He then closed the wizard tower again and let the tower genie continue to watch over the place. Only then did he use a teleportation spell to leave this place. North Town Mystery Land. Su Len hurried to the vicinity of the wisdom tree. After greeting Sandy and the others, he returned to his room. As soon as he got close to the wisdom tree, Sullen's original irritable impulse to destroy everything began to weaken. What followed was a tranquil and natural smell. In fact, the best target to extract divinity was not the god's corpse, nor the ancient evil creatures. It was the unicorn, the eastern condor, the feathered serpent god, the totem spirit, and so on. The divinity contained in these divine creatures or divine spirits was very pure. It was not like the one Su Len extracted, which was full of chaos, evil, and destruction. Of course, the unicorn, the eastern condor, the feathered serpent god, and the totem spirit were not to be trifled with. After the arcane kingdom, the unicorn had become very rare. The eastern condor had also disappeared. The feathered serpent god had also left the material plane. As for the totem spirit, if one wanted to find this kind of intelligence, one had to go deep into the mountains and forests to find the uncivilized natives. The totem spirit was the god that the primitive tribes worshipped. Although they were not true gods, they had part of the power of the gods. It could be said that they were very difficult to deal with. The strength of the totem spirit was usually at the level of a demigod. However, there were some who worshipped a large number of people or worshipped for a long time. Their strength would not be inferior to that of a true god. Su Len meditated while slowly removing the remnant thoughts in his body. At the same time, he integrated the god's power into his body. Chapter 636. The faint aura of nature shrouded him, and the ancient tree of wisdom constantly emitted the power of nature. Su Len woke up from meditation, and the remaining evil thoughts in his body had dissipated a lot. Looking at the situation, it would be completely eliminated in about 2 more times. Without the ancient tree of wisdom, Su Len usually needed a week or even longer to use meditation to get rid of the remaining evil thoughts. According to the research on the ancient god's corpse, the divinity in the ancient god's corpse can be extracted more than 20 times. In addition to the divinity extracted from the ancient god's corpse when the abomination was born, this ancient god's corpse originally had more than 40 or even 50 points of divinity. Su Len rubbed his forehead and calculated, an ancient god's corpse contains 40 or 50 points of divinity, so how much divinity did he have when he was alive? A demigod needs 10 points, a weak god needs 20 points of divinity, and a weak god needs 50 points. This giant ancient god's corpse is at least a weak divine power god. It might even be a mid-divine power god. An ancient god's corpse has so much divinity, no wonder the god's corpse is called a treasure. The divinity and power of the gods in the age of the ancient gods were stronger than that of the later gods. However, the gods of faith grew faster, and the power of the ancient gods would not change much from birth to death in the divine war. But the gods of faith were different. As long as there were enough people who believed in them, their power would continue to grow. So as long as the material world was prosperous enough, the power of the gods would slowly grow. But there were also gods who did not grow in this way, such as the Queen of Spiders Lolth in the Abyss. After the death of a believer, the soul would enter the divine kingdom and become a petitioner. When returning to the divine kingdom, the believer would give back power to the god. The Queen of Spiders used this way to let the drows under her command kill each other and use all kinds of tricks to plot against each other. At the same time, she gave these drows the characteristics of sexual chaos, which also led to the drows having the highest fertility rate of all elves. Of course, if the fertility rate of the drows was the same as that of other elves, maybe the drows would have disappeared by now. After all, the drows had learned all kinds of infighting, backstabbing, betrayal, and so on. Clans would kill each other for revenge. Spider Queen Lolth used this method to make her believers kill each other. No matter who won, she would gain a lot of benefits. It was also through this method that the strength of God Empress Lolth continued to increase after a long period of fighting among the drows. Finally, taking advantage of a series of major events, he successfully became a god with great divine power. The price was that for thousands of years, the population of the drows had not increased but decreased. Drow infighting would cause a lot of deaths. Sometimes, the population would drop below the warning line. At this moment, the Spider Queen would directly surrender. Although the Spider Queen Lolth's method allowed her to obtain a large amount of divine power, it also came with considerable repercussions. Time passed little by little. In addition to extracting and digesting the divinity, Su Lin spent the rest of his time modifying the floating space tower. Su Lin had already decided to build a floating city, and various preparations had already begun. In order to reduce consumption, Su Lin planned to use Northgard City as the main body of the floating city. There were many buildings of wonder in Northgard City. These buildings of wonder had magical powers, and Su Lin was reluctant to leave these powers behind. After all, it would cost a lot of money and time to rebuild these buildings of wonder. After planning to use Northgard City as the main body of the floating city, the construction of the floating city could be said to have saved a lot of money. However, after using Northgard City as the main body of the floating city, it seemed that Northgard City needed to be modified. The foundation of the city needed to be replaced with obsidian and blessed with hardening, so that the floating city would become harder than steel. In the laboratory, Su Lin was conducting an experiment. He was making magic diamond, which was the main material for making diamond golems. Magic diamond was actually not diamond, but a kind of crystal, but it looked very similar to diamond in terms of hardness and appearance. This kind of crystal needed to be made in a special way. Galaxy. Prepare to record the data and start testing the artificial magic diamond experiment. The Galaxy Tower spirit appeared in mid-air, and a magic aura rose from Sullen's body. Then, countless tiny rune marks appeared in front of him. Rune marks were different from mageweths and runes. No matter what kind of rune it was, mageweths were two-dimensional, usually flat, but rune marks were different. They had a three-dimensional structure. Rune marks were formed by the combination of runes, and this kind of rune marks had great power. The use of rune marks had high requirements. It was a technique created in the Arcane Empire. Compared to runes, it was more efficient and powerful. Su Lin was now using rune marks. The golden aura continued to gather in mid-air, and soon the aura converged into a shiny rune. Su Lin gently sprinkled some silver powder, and the silver powder quickly filled the rune marks. As the rune became brighter and brighter, the rune in front of him quickly changed from a two-dimensional structure to a three-dimensional structure. With the appearance of the rune marks, Su Lin gently waved his hand, and the rune marks in front of him instantly merged into a silver vessel. Then, the aura flickered a few times and disappeared. There were many differences in structure between magic diamond and ordinary diamond. The molecular structure of magic diamond was not the octahedral joint of diamond, but a more complex structure, which required the use of other crystals, diamond, graphite and other materials to modify. In terms of magic conductivity, magic diamond wasn't very good, but its magic resistance and physical resistance were shockingly high. Therefore, this special gem was very suitable for making diamond golems. Diamond stones were also called diamonds. Large and pure diamonds were very valuable and could be used in many experiments. Therefore, small diamonds were usually used when making magical diamonds. Diamond reserves were very high, and even high-quality large diamonds were very abundant. As for the rare situation of diamonds in his previous life, it was completely hyped up by businessmen. It was said that the number of diamonds mined by businessmen was enough to give everyone in the world a piece of diamond. Of course, the diamonds here were definitely not large, but small diamonds. That was a diamond less than a carat. How heavy was a carat? 0.2 grams. One could imagine how small it was. In his previous life, this thing was like an IQ tax, but you had to pinch your nose and buy it. As for the value of diamonds, it was even more of a scam. Recycled diamonds were worth less than 1/10 of the purchase price, and many times, they were rejected directly. Chapter 637. Magical adamantine used a part of diamond as raw materials, and another part was magical crystals and colorful gemstone powder. After mixing these materials according to a certain ratio and using some other methods to fuse and refine, the magical adamantine could be obtained. The ratio of this kind of magic diamond could be adjusted. Basically, every wizard had their own secret recipe. Different ratios would produce different properties of the magic diamond. For example, the magic diamond used in Hathaway's diamond statue was very outstanding in terms of physical and magical defense. But on the other hand, these diamond statues were a bit inferior in terms of movement speed and energy conductivity. This was mainly because the two diamond golems made by Hathaway were basically used in the wizard tower. They belonged to the defensive type. They would only fight when others attacked the wizard tower. This kind of golem cooperated with the tower spirit to fight, and the wizard tower would bless them with various spells. Others, such as the offensive diamond golems, used magic diamond golems with better magic conductivity and decent physical and magic defense. This kind of diamond golem had powerful attack power, fast movement speed, and all kinds of support spells. The golem army often used this kind of diamond golem. In addition to making diamond golems, magical adamantine could also be used to make another kind of golem, the arcane guard. The arcane guard was a legendary golem that was stronger than the diamond golem. The challenge level of the diamond golem was level 21, while the arcane guard was level 24. It was only a step away from high-level legendary. For example, the ratio of magical adamantine used by the arcane guard was completely different from that of the diamond golem. This kind of magical adamantine had high magic conductivity, and this kind of magical adamantine also had high physical and magical resistance. The only problem was that it was also very expensive. The arcane guard not only had strong melee ability, but it could also release various spells. In short, it was a kind of legendary golem that practiced both magic and martial arts. The strong combat power also meant that the production of this kind of golem was expensive. In the era of the Arcane Empire, there was a famous arcanist who said that the golem army was a combat power that was piled up with money. Sulen was now experimenting with the magical adamantine used to make the arcane guard. Information on golems of this level was basically classified as top-secret information. It was very difficult to trade for it. The Northwind Tower only had this kind of information because they had obtained it from the secret realm where the abomination was sealed. Although there was basically nothing left in that place, the Tower Genie's virtual library was still intact. Otherwise, the Northwind Tower would not have such high-end technology. However, there were only a few recipes for the enchanted crystal that he had obtained from the virtual library. Sulen had to mix them himself to find the right ratio. Then, he prepared the prepared magical diamond material and placed it in a special container. Sulen raised his head and looked at the magic clock hanging on the wall. He then said to Ihn-He, record the situation of the reactor every half an hour. If there are any abnormalities, inform me immediately. If everything is normal, let me know in 8 hours. Yes, Master. The cold mechanical voice sounded in his ears. This method of synthesizing magical adamantine was to simulate a special environment and let the magical adamantine fuse according to certain conditions. This method did not require manual operation. In the era of the Arcane Empire, there were many alchemy workshops. They used professional alchemy furnaces to refine all kinds of synthetic metals and magical materials. It was said that in the era of the Arcane Empire, there were a lot of such factories. Their production in a day was comparable to the amount of magical metals that all the wizards in the Tyrol world could refine in a year. It was also because of this method that during the era of the Arcane Empire, those powerful arcanist teams could obtain a huge amount of resources and easily form all kinds of golem armies or magical creations. This was also one of the reasons why the Arcane Empire was so powerful. As long as they were willing, the number of various golems would increase tremendously under the full production of the factories. Moreover, there were many benefits to the factory. Although the factory standard could not produce high-quality golems, it could control the quality within a very small range, and the advantage of doing so was that the price was reduced. However, it also cost a lot of money to make an alchemy factory. It was necessary to invest in it. For example, the container used by Sulen just now was made of a lot of adamantine. The interior was made of some arcane steel, and the runes on it were engraved with mithril. The cost of this set of equipment was as high as millions of kinnar, which was more expensive than a diamond golem. The amount of money an adept had was also an indication of how powerful that adept was. Of course, some of the guys who were favored by the goddess of luck needed to be distinguished. The world was very unfair. It was destined from the moment of birth. Family, power, and so on, there was a very special existence among them. These people's luck was so good that it made people jealous. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were blessed by the goddess of luck. For example, the arcanist who found the body of the ancient god. In the boundless astral world, the probability of finding the body of an ancient god was basically 1 in tens of millions or even 1 in a billion. The arcanist who found the body of the ancient god was favored by the goddess of luck. It was just that the arcanist had some problems with the use of the ancient god's body. How exaggerated would it be to be favored by the goddess of luck? It could be said that it was more powerful than having a protagonist's halo. When one went out to pick up money, one could do whatever one wanted. One could find treasures by just running around, and enemies would come knocking on one's door by just waving one's sword. It could be said that when the time came, the heavens and the earth worked together. Of course, the goddess of luck liked the new and hated the old. She was temperamental. You might be favored by the goddess of luck 1 second, but the next second, the goddess of luck had already left. The goddess of luck and the goddess of misfortune were a pair of twin goddesses, and the two of them did not get along well. The goddess of misfortune was jealous that the goddess of luck was loved by humans, while she, as a goddess, was feared by humans. This made the goddess of misfortune very jealous, so she deliberately went against the goddess of luck. The result was that after being favored by the goddess of luck, once this favor was lost, they would be cursed by the goddess of misfortune. As a result, many people ended up dying because they believed too much in luck. It was said that in the multiverse, there was a mithril mine that was entirely made of mithril. Perhaps only those who were favored by the goddess of luck could find this mithril mine. After about 8 hours, Sulen walked out of the meditation room. The tower spirit, Milky Way, had already told him that the alchemy reactor had stopped working. Sulen came in front of the reactor and checked the various data on the tower spirit, Milky Way's record. After confirming that everything was normal, he gently pressed a few times on the reactor. Accompanied by a burst of energy fluctuation, the sealed container on the reactor slowly opened at this moment. Sulen snapped his fingers, and a wizard's hand appeared in front of him. Sulen skillfully operated the wizard's hand and took out the item from the reactor. A purple crystal the size of an egg appeared in front of him. This purple crystal was very transparent and hard. It looked like a purple diamond. It was the enchanted diamond, also known as the enchanted crystal. Looks like the effect is not bad. Su Lin picked up the enchanted diamond and examined it carefully. The enchanted diamond made in this way had completely met the requirements. A ray of light rose from Su Lin's hand and checked the enchanted diamond. He nodded and said, "The quality is not bad. It's qualified." The enchanted diamond's conductivity was excellent. At the same time, its physical and magical resistance was also very high. It completely met the requirements of making an arcane guard. The next step was to start producing these enchanted diamonds. But before that, he planned to build an automatic alchemy factory. Since he had already experienced the convenience of the alchemy reactor, Su Lin did not plan to give up just like that. Although this kind of alchemy reactor wasn't cheap, it was convenient to use. Another reason was that although the investment was huge, it would be very cost-effective in the long run. Moreover, Bignar wasn't taking it all out at once, he was using it for a long time. Tower Spirit, Milky Way. "Give me the blueprint of the automatic alchemy factory," Su Lin said. The automatic alchemy factory was mainly controlled by the Tower Genie. There were various clay golems that were responsible for the specific operations. Su Lin only needed to set the program, and the clay golems would be produced according to the program. The Tower Genie, Milky Way, only needed to command the golems to carry out the work. At the same time, she would also be responsible for the daily maintenance of the alchemy factory. With the alchemy factory, the arcane steel, thorium, and other metals that required Su Lin or Hathaway to synthesize could also be produced in the alchemy factory. It was convenient, fast, stable, and had a high success rate. Of course, in addition to the high cost, the alchemy factory also required a large amount of energy. If it was the old wizard tower, after installing the alchemy factory, there would be a shortage of energy in the elemental pool. This would require some reduction in other aspects. But now, the Northwind Tower had already installed the elemental fission furnace, and its energy was many times more than before. Not to mention an alchemy factory, even if the energy consumption of the alchemy factory was increased tenfold, the Northwind Tower's energy would be more than enough. Although the elemental fission furnace is good, it is still far inferior to the elemental fusion furnace. It is more than enough for the wizard tower, but it is not enough for the floating city. Su Lin rubbed his forehead. If he wanted to upgrade the floating city, he had to research the elemental fusion furnace. But Hathaway said last time that she had already started experimenting. I believe that the construction of the elemental fusion furnace will start soon. You're tuning in to the UnparalleledSwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.